What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here, joined by Andy Herman of the Pack-A-Day podcast after a Packers victory. How many P's can I fit into a introduction? Andy, how the hell are you, man?
I'm doing great. Happy Victory Monday. It's always fun, and especially one where it's not like you're expecting a loss, but you have no idea what to expect going into that game, and you get a victory out of it. Always a lot more fun.
I mean, kudos to Matt LaFleur. Let's start there. Yep. As far as the approach to the game, clearly with a backup quarterback, Packers fans of recent vintage, probably, to your point, not really knowing what to expect, certainly in recent history, haven't had great experiences watching backup quarterbacks at Lambeau Field or anywhere else don the green and gold and things. So, under McCarthy seemed to fall apart. But I tell you what, the plan that Matt had, which I will say, I did not expect him to lean into the running game the way he did. I did think, yes, of course, you have to run the ball. Of course, Josh Jacobs is going to be a focal point of the offense. But I felt pretty certain that Matt would still continue to spread it out a bit and throw a bit more early on in this game. But the fact that he buttoned it up and went essentially like 1950s football, that I was shocked and pleasantly so.
I wonder how much was predicated on the fact that he just didn't need to. Like, he was able to run.
There is some of that. When you're staying ahead of the sticks, why change, right?
Staying ahead of the sticks, you're never behind in the game. You're consistently getting third and shorts and just never really having to put Malik Willis in a position where there is even a concern of a mistake. And credit Malik too. Matt did an unbelievable job of, kind of calling out the fact that it's not just the passing yards, not just the rushing yards and the efficiency, but all the calls in the huddle, the cadence, getting everyone aligned correctly, keeping everything where there's no delay of games. Just all of that was masterful as well. But you talk about an offensive line that came ready to play, vomiting or not vomiting, they were ready to fire off the ball and take care of the Colts defense. So and then like you said, just consistently run the football and the variety in which they did it. I mean, they lined up with orbits, motions, pistol formation, shotgun, under center, quarterback runs, wide receiver runs, running back runs, 3 different running backs. You didn't know what was hitting you. You didn't know if it was power zone, again, read option. You had no idea in any given moment what they were going to run. Quarterback draw out of empty. Like, they brought everything. Matt was completely 1,000,000% prepared, and it was a fun offense to watch. How many times in the history have there been a backup quarterback and you're like, this offense is fun to watch? Like, that offense was fun to watch.
It's usually dull as ditch, right? Yep. It's so simplified or what have you. I'm glad you brought up what Matt said about Malik as far as the operation of the offense, right?
Yeah.
How many times over the course of these first 2 weeks in the NFL have we seen? I mean, it seems like an epidemic as far as illegal formation penalties and procedural pre-snap stuff, biting teams. Like, and I know it's been a point of emphasis, etc. But man, Malik, great job making sure that everyone was set. And I think, for my memory now, going back and having watched it a couple times now, there were a handful of snaps where he did make adjustments at the line with specific guys saying, make sure you're up, make sure you're back, things like that. That's outstanding. And the fact that, the kid's been in the room for 20 days?
Yep.
A little bit more, maybe. I was so impressed. And again, pretty surprised that even when things got a little dicey there in the second half, clearly LaFleur wanted to stick with the plan as far as we're going to run this football. Colts adjusted, did start getting them behind the sticks. But, and you and I have talked about this here before, that kind of sped up, I'm not going to call it panic, but that desire seemingly within LaFleur at times to want to get it all back, or, oh my gosh, we've got to make something happen. That never materialized. He stuck with what was clearly his plan come hell or high water, and I think it paid dividends for him.
Yeah, we've talked about it almost like a poker player playing on tilt and just being like, oh, I just lost a big hand. I got to go win it back right away.
Go get it back.
Just none of that. Just sticking with it consistently, not trying to push the envelope on the 2-minute drill, not trying to push the envelope on the final drive. Like, you get a first down and you seal that thing away. And yeah, he could have probably thrown the ball on that drive, but man, he put the burden on the Colts to be like, we're not going to be the one that's going to be throwing around aggressively and trying to do something here. You're going to have to do that. We're going to run the ball 3 times. You're going to use your 2 timeouts. We're going to run 40 seconds off the clock. If we pick up a first down, great. If we don't, we're going to make you go 95 yards in 40 seconds with no timeouts. We don't think that you can do it. And again, yes, could we seal this thing away right now with maybe a throw to the outside? But I think what you understand very clearly there is, and I talked about this on the pod, is you have if you run an out route and Malik is expecting 10 yards or throws 10 yards and the receiver's used to running at 8, and that just is a disconnect there because they've never really done it before, and all of a sudden that turns into a pick or a batted ball that's an incompletion, they could have called a screen pass on it. But if it ends up in the dirt and now you don't run those 40 seconds off, that defensive situation is way different for Jeff Hafley and company. So he just said, and I kind of pointed this out to Perry and friends yesterday, of like, if you could have signed up pregame, for any of it, that you would have been up 10.
I kept saying this during the game on the watch party. Exactly.
Like, just sign me up for this all the way around. And Matt did a great job of not being like, well, it could be better. It could, like, we could even be. No, it's just like, you know what? If you could have signed up ahead of time that the other team has to go 95 yards in 40 seconds with no timeouts, you would have signed it in blood, and you don't need to do anything more than that. So put the burden on them.
I mean, you talk about the execution of a running game that was historic in the first half as far as just gobbling up yardage, really kind of taking ownership of the game. You got to shout out the offensive line and all 5 guys, all 6 guys, really, when you're talking about the right guard spot. I don't think I remember a game of in recent memory anyway, where the offensive line really owned the game. Yeah. I mean, in the run game, too. Like, we're so used to this group being adept in pass pro and then being somewhat kind of intermittently effective in the run game. I mean, look no further than the beginning of last year when the run blocking for the first month or so, even more so probably, was downright bad, right? And then you come into week 2 of this game where you desperately need to run the football. The whole stadium knows you're going to run the football. Certainly the defense knows you want to run the football, and you're able to do so to such great effect. I mean, it felt like 2003. That's what I kept thinking. Like, when everyone knew Ahman Green was going to get the ball, Ahman Green got the ball, and they still, ripped off 5 yards per carry. It was truly that impressive, and it all goes back to those guys up front.
I'm curious your thoughts on this as well. To me, Matt had to learn something about his offensive line on that day. Like, you have to because I don't know that in the Matt LaFleur era, and to your point, it's been basically 2003 since we've seen something like that. I certainly can't remember a time. I know that the Dallas game last year was a really good rushing attack in the playoff game. A lot of that to me was just Aaron Jones, a really good game plan too, but it wasn't necessarily just the offensive line going and mauling people. And this was the first time in the Matt LaFleur era where I really felt like that offensive line just went out there for 60 minutes and just dominated the line of scrimmage. To your point, when everyone in the stadium knew it was coming. And at some point, Jordan's going to come back, maybe slightly limited mobility, maybe more than slightly limited mobility, or maybe not 100%. And just knowing that, I think he has that in his bag a little bit more, that, hey, maybe we can just play a more balanced style of football. To me, it has to be something that he really took away of, like, and he's the very famous, the standard's now the standard. To me, the standard's now the standard.
You know, put it on tape.
Yep.
You did it to yourself. We know you can do it. I do think the creativity in the game planning and the actual, designs of the plays themselves. You mentioned it earlier. They threw so much at the Colts as far as motion and just holding eye discipline for the Colts defense, where, again, they know you're running the football, but how are you running it? Down in and down out. There were so many plays where they did such a good job, especially early on, as far as design goes, holding that edge just a split second of, wait, is this guy on the end around or the motion or whatever, is he getting the ball? Is this guy not? Oh, he's not. Then I'm going to crash down. But that split second of indecision created some real opportunities for Jacobs. And again, they just took advantage of it, especially early. And man, it's real easy to sit here and say and watch the tape today afterwards and say, oh, look at this game plan. It's amazing. But I mean, everybody's got a plan to get punched in the mouth. And the Packers were the ones doing the punching yesterday. And it was good to see.
It was really nice to see. And I just want to shout out. I'll be honest. I'm halfway through the offensive tape. I've got all through the defensive tape, but through the first half, this is some of the best football I've seen Josh Myers play, specifically as a. I
was going to get to Josh.
Yeah,
for this very reason.
It's always, obviously there are times where we've got to be critical of players, and it's always the least favorite part of my job. But man, do I love when a player that maybe gets ragged on a little bit goes out and has an awesome game. And I felt like Josh, at least again, through the first half of this game, looked absolutely fantastic, getting to the second level, showing off the athleticism, sealing blocks, and just making things a whole heck of a lot easier for the running backs. Was really, really fun stuff from Josh in this game.
I thought he did a great job of, getting to that second level. And even when they didn't have him on an initial block and he's just firing out and getting to the second level, his athleticism really popped in this game, I thought. And it's funny you mentioned that, because that brings me to the tight end spot and Tucker Kraft, where I thought he was such a great extension of the offensive line in this game. And of course, we did see the one kind of, where he disengages and gets out into the flat as a kind of an emergency check down for Malik Willis. But ultimately, you didn't need him to be a part of the passing game. He absolutely balled out as basically a sixth offensive lineman at times, but a guy who, yeah, he blocks whoever you're asking him to, but it doesn't matter if it's a defensive end or a safety or a corner, a linebacker. He was all over everybody. And the way he has elevated his game from this time last year to now is one of it. I was kind of chatting with Ben Fennell about it online today. It's one of the biggest jumps I can remember in a guy's overall level of play in my lifetime of watching Green Bay Packers football. I mean, he looked absolutely lost last September, and he looks like he's potentially a 10-year stalwart starter in the NFL right now. Such a good game from Kraft.
It really, really was one of my favorite players to watch on the team. And to your point, we were there in training camp last year where it just looked like you talk about the ultimate, just head swimming, eyes not like just confused and be like, well, all right, what is going on here? To middle of last year when he went in for Luke Musgrave and immediately started making an impact, run after the catch guy. And then to where he is now as a blocker is massively impressive. And when you get some of these tight ends where, and again, these are some more of the extremes, but a Mercedes Lewis, you just know that guy's going to be in there for blocking. And a Luke Musgrave, for the most part, that guy's going to be in there for receiving. And of course, those kind of on the extreme ends. But when you get a guy like Tucker Kraft that can do a little bit of all of it and really do it well, man, does that make things complicated for the defense. There's no tell of what's coming. And, I've seen some people like, does the Kraft and Musgrave thing need to be, should Musgrave be, I'm like, Go watch the very first play on offense of this game, and you will see Kraft come across and just completely aggressively go after I think it was a linebacker, an edge player, and seal that block. And then Musgrave gets to his spot and is just like, I'm here. I'm good. I'm good with being here. This is fine. And it wasn't necessarily indicative of Musgrave the entire game. I thought he had some good blocks in this one, but it was just like a jarring.
It's a very night and day presentation on one play.
I'm like, well, there you go. Just throw that play on to anyone. And you'll be like, yeah, I want that guy that's completely going a million miles per hour at that defensive end. That's the guy I want on the field more. And he's just a really, really fun player. He's only going to get better. My bold take before the season was this was going to be the breakout player on the Packers this year. I'm sticking with it. Tucker Kraft, I'm so excited for him.
Absolutely love it. And I'll tell you what, talking about blocking, what did Matt LaFleur say during training camp? No block, no rock. Yeah. Well, a lot of these guys are going to end up getting, the rock down the road here during this season because, man, they blocked their asses off on the perimeter yesterday. I thought it was funny, too, because it was such a quiet day for Christian Watson, but he was really getting after it in the run game. And that's so funny that you don't hear from a guy during the game, but then you go back and you watch the tape and it's like, wow. There was one play in particular where the Jaden Reed swing pass where he takes it up the right sideline. Tucker Kraft takes the corner out into the sideline essentially, but Watson does a great job of basically sealing that allows Jaden to get up the field. All the receivers I thought really brought it in the run game, and that's what you need, especially in a game like this that helps turn 3, 4, 5 yard gains into 15 or 20 yard gains.
Listen, we all have Madden and fantasy football brain, right? We all have fantasy football brain.
Truly.
We all want to see big explosive plays. We want to see the highlights. And you look at the box score and you're like, oh, Christian Watson skunked in this one again. And we'll talk about the edge rushers, I'm sure, in a little bit as well, and what their job was in this particular game. But your job in these games is not necessarily always to go out and do the sexiest thing. Sometimes your job is to do the little things. And we'll talk about the defensive end, but Christian Watson in this one, doing all the little things that you need to go out and win. I thought Ross Uglum posted a great video of a play where Watson comes wide open in the middle of the field and Willis is rolling right. And he sees kind of Watson there and decides, do I want to throw or do I want to run? Decides to run. And to Ross's point, like we've seen wide receivers just throw tantrums and be like, I'm wide open in the middle of the field. Why are you not getting me the ball? And instead, Watson turns around, finds a safety, and then goes and blocks that safety 5 yards into the end zone. And it's like, those are winning football plays. And you know what? Yeah, I don't even think had a target in this game. Nope. Do not care one bit. He was doing his job, and that's all you can ask for. And that's the fun stuff that I think we get to talk about every Monday is guys that are doing their job that maybe don't always show up in the stat sheet.
Unlike, certain wide receivers in Pittsburgh. That's neither here nor there. So let's flip it over. You did mention the defensive ends and the rush plan from the front, which I thought was incredibly effective yet again. I don't doubt for a moment that we're going to see a very different approach from the front four as a collective in this game upcoming against the Titans, right? It's a very different, A, style of offense, but B, very different type of quarterback, right? These first 2 weeks, we've certainly seen an approach where Hafley and company have wanted to make sure that these quarterbacks who have incredible ability with their legs, their mobility is off the charts, do not kill them with their legs. Do not hurt them by not just on design runs, but just escaping the pocket in general and hurting you that way. They very clearly have been rushing with a purpose as far as hemming these guys in and making sure they don't have easy escape routes. Now, sometimes things are going to happen and break down and what the guys are going to get beat. That happens. No question about it. But I didn't think for a second that, Richardson was about to take off on some huge run or really kill them with his legs at any point in that game, because they were so well disciplined. And I got to tell you, it's all the same guys that we've seen the last couple of years, and it's an entirely different way of working. And I understand probably there are some fans out there who are like, well, I was told we're going to get upfield, we're going to destroy gaps, we're going to rush the quarterback that way, etc. And I think that's coming. But I think through the first 2 weeks, but especially including this game against Richardson, those front four, whatever combination you want to talk about, they've done a phenomenal job of doing their job and making sure that the quarterbacks in question don't kill them.
Yeah, let's talk in three. Will Levis, Sam Darnold, and Matthew Stafford coming up.
It's going to be a bit different.
Three very different quarterbacks. Let's talk about the pass rush after those games and see, exactly how this looks. And to your point, people want to take the soundbite and say, we're going to get upfield and we're going to be aggressive and we're going to be attacking. I want to talk about the soundbite where Jeff Hafley talked about how they were going to switch the defense up based on what opponent that they were playing and not just do the same thing over and over and over again. And I can make an argument. I think anyone can make an argument where maybe there were times they needed to be more aggressive coming after Jalen Hurts when sort of the keeping him in the pocket and him throwing it around wasn't working the greatest. I think there maybe needed to be a little bit of a counterpunch there, but against Anthony Richardson, it was working all day long. Keep him in the pocket. Don't let him escape and make him throw, uncomfortable positions where he wanted to get out and roll out a little bit more. And he just could not find it. And you just let him stay in that pocket and keep throwing incomplete passes. And you'll just keep doing it until he can prove you different. I thought this was the right game plan for this game. Again, not the sexiest thing from the pass rushers, but all of them, I think, even deserve more credit for not taking the carrot or not taking the dollar on the fishing pole and not going after it and being like, I want to go get my, and pad my stats. I'm going to just do what I was asked, make sure that I'm containing everything, make sure that Richardson stays in the pocket. And like I said, we'll see, I think, a lot different approach over the next 3 weeks with three far fewer mobile quarterbacks than what we saw the last 2 weeks.
I think, and the one guy I just did want to highlight is Devontae Wyatt, because I thought this was just a really promising performance for a guy who, look, all summer long we talked about, it seemed the style that he's being asked to play really seems to suit him, but that hasn't been what he's been asked to do these first 2 weeks as far as penetrating through one gap and just blowing things up, etc. He's been disciplined as hell, and I thought on his sack or the edge kind of play where he gets around on a stunt with LVN, I just think it's really promising to see a guy who, sure looked a bit like hit and miss these first couple years in Green Bay. But, man, I'm telling you, that game, I thought, from what I've watched, he just looked like the exact type of player you want up front in this defense, as far as not just doing the discipline things that you're asking him to do, but when you are telling him, okay, now it's time on that third down, we can get you around the edge, go beat that tackle. And he does. As a defensive tackle, it's pretty damn impressive.
He was kind of the guy of all of them that, not only did his job in containing, but also elevated a little bit and was kind of getting some pressure on top of it, and in a good way. And again, he's not even being asked to do what I think his superpower is yet, which again, I think we're going to see a lot more over the next 3 weeks, but I'm glad you called him out. I thought this was a really, really solid performance for Devontae Wyatt. In fact, I thought he had a good game against Philly too. I don't know that he's, breaking out in this major way or anything. Well, again, we'll get a better feel for him over the next couple of weeks, but man, just go out and play good football. And that's what Devontae Wyatt's done over these last couple of weeks.
What did you make of the secondary? I'm not going to call it rotation, but the idea that we saw some really interesting snap counts. Carrington Valentine saw a whole lot more of the field than I was expecting. It was funny because during watch party, you know, I see these numbers flash, and I'm trying to remember now. We've overhauled the roster, Herman, so I'm like trying to remember what numbers mean, like for names, and I was like, who is that? That's not Eric Stokes. That's who? And then I was, oh, that's Valentine, right? And he looked, I'm not going to say, I don't want to pump it up too much, but I was very, very, very pleased with his performance down in and down out. I remember him being serviceable last season.
Yep.
Certainly we saw him flash a bit early in camp, right? And then he got hurt, missed a lot of time. And that's maybe why he's kind of been pushed back into the recesses of my mind. But I thought he really played a pretty damn good game yesterday for his first meaningful kind of work of the season.
Yeah, I thought he was fantastic. Obviously, the big pass breakup in the back, you know, kind of the right near the corner of the end zone. And, you know, just overall, I thought he was aggressive in the run game. I thought he was, you know, covering consistently and in man and in zone, just looked the part. And it was funny because when I first watched it live and then just did the rewatch, I'm like, it really felt like Stokes started, then Valentine played like the middle, like 3 quarters, basically.
Right.
And then Stokes was on the final drive. And I'm like, what are we doing? But as I watched it back, Stokes actually got in there a couple more times during the middle. So it did actually feel like a legitimate rotation. I still couldn't tell you the why or the how or what like the thinking is. I don't know if it's just vibes or if there's actually like yep, in this situation, we want Eric. In this situation, we want Carrington. I don't know. It's tough to tell. But I thought, first of all, I want to give credit to Eric Stokes because I think not perfect by any means these last 2 weeks, but just coming in and looking like a viable starting corner, which
yes.
I don't know what it was going to look like coming off all the injuries, struggled in year 2 before even the injuries hit, and then came back, played 2 weeks last year, looked extremely rusty. He looks like a viable starting.
You're being kind. He put some real rough stuff on tape last year.
Fair
enough.
Be
honest.
Fair enough.
Know, and I'm with you. You didn't know what to expect, right? And he looked promising in camp, but it's camp. Who knows? I'm with you, man. He surprisingly well. That's how I think he's played.
Yes,
I think especially considering everything that's come before.
And I think, to your point, I think Carrington was even a step better than that. And I think that's why this is a conversation. I think this is why they'll continue to rotate. I don't think it necessarily behooves either of them to necessarily just sit the entire game and not play at all. So I don't have a strong take of like one guy should start over the other. I kind of like, I don't know if they can maybe figure out a rotation that maybe makes some like sort of logical sense, but whatever they did in this game, it worked, and maybe it can just keep working. But right now I like both of those guys, and I just hope they both keep playing well.
That's great, because now we can kind of avoid the Keyshawn Nixon getting beat up the right sideline and all of Twitter absolutely losing its mind about a guy getting beat one play. Like, look, I'm not here to tell you Keyshawn Nixon is the greatest slot corner in the league, all right? But I do think he has played pretty damn well through 2 games. And I understand he's targeted a lot. Of course he is. What, are you going to throw at Jair? No. You're going to throw at Keyshawn Nixon. I understand he's going to get tested. I think he's played better so far through these 2 games than most of last year, when I thought, yeah, he's kind of on the job training, so to speak, in the slot, etc. I understand that people want all the new toys on the field all the time, right? But it is a long season. And I think they have obviously committed to Keyshawn, given the contract they handed him this past offseason. And I haven't seen anything egregious that, you know, in my mentions, it certainly feels like people are, quote, over it already. And it's like, we got a long way to go here, and they are playing winning football on the defensive side of the ball. I understand the frustrations, but can we let this breathe just a little bit?
It's funny because I've had slight negative grades on Keyshawn these last 2 weeks, and I got to putting it together at the end, and I'm like, I didn't really expect it to be, because I'm like, I've kind of liked how he's played the last couple of weeks. And what I've just kind of learned a little bit is like, lower the bar a little bit on slot corner. That is a impossible ask of just about everyone. That is such an extremely difficult position to play. And you having to be good against the run, having to blitz, having to cover every size, speed, and flavor of target in the slot that you can possibly imagine. Not only week by week, but game by, like in an individual game, you'll have a multitude of tight ends, running backs, and wide receivers lined up in that spot. Not to mention pulling guards and tackles coming at you, tight ends trying to rip your face off. Like, it is a massively tough position. And for me, Keyshawn should be the starter in the slot. I have no issue with him being in that spot. I don't think they are in any way losing games because he's in the slot. And until I see anything different, that would be the guy that I would roll with in that spot as well.
And look, you're bringing other guys along. I understand that we're going to see hell, just like we saw this past week, as far as a very different rotation than we saw week 1 when it came to the secondary. I don't doubt for a moment we'll continue to see that evolve as the season goes on. I just want people to be a little more patient than calling for guys' jobs. Real quick, I know you got to get going, but let me ask you about Daniel Whalen, the punter. Am I okay? Am I on firm ground if I start to get excited about this kid? Because I know it's a punter, it's a specialist. We try to stay away from getting excited about those, but he looks like a viable weapon. And I understand we got to wait till we get cold at Lambeau late in the year. That's when the rubber really meets the road. But man, he was a big part of this victory against the Colts.
The field position was massive, and 3 punts, all 3 within the 20-yard line is huge. And listen, whether he needs to be a weapon or not, I don't even care. Just we have a very low bar for special teams playing Green Bay. Just be competent. Just be competent. Yeah. We're good.
We're back to that. Yeah.
And he is well above competent right now. I don't see that changing anytime soon. He's been freaking awesome. He's got a leg and a half. He crushed it during camp, like you said. We'll see what happens in winter and in some of the colder months. But overall, I could not be happier. I know it's just a punter or whatever, but he's crushing it. And it's just really fun. And again, it's another one of these guys that Goody just finds out of absolutely nowhere. I think an XFL guy, if I remember correctly.
Yes, sir.
And just all of a sudden, he's just crushing it for Green Bay. So Goody has found players from practice squads, XFL, internationally. It doesn't matter. He finds it. And this is another great example of it.
Absolutely love it. Andy, so great to talk to you. We'll talk to you later this week when we preview the upcoming game against the Titans. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you soon.
Can't wait. Thanks so much, Aaron.